We're going to interrupt that and go live to the Treasurer, Scott Morrison, in Parliament House in Canberra, giving a media conference.
And now Chris Bowen, and it all basically unravelling on them. There are three things that I think have been clear over the events of the last 24 hours in particular. It's not a question of whether there's a black hole when it comes to Labor's unfunded spending. It's just a question of how big it is. The other day I made it very clear about the extent of the black hole that could be there, that was there, based on the Labor Party's clear, articulated statements over several years. And what is very clear now is that there is a big black hole. There is an addition to the deficit over the next 4 years, over and above what is in the current budget and forward estimates, over and above what is in PFO, because Labor is spending too much. And they're not offsetting that spending with other savings or tax measures. What's also clear is that Labor cannot claim in this election to be funding any commitment whatsoever from not proceeding with the tax cuts for small and medium-sized businesses or the other revenue measures they have identified. What is clearly not in dispute is that the $16 billion that they have identified in tax measures and in small savings measures is more than eaten up by the measures that they have opposed, said they will oppose in the Senate, that are contained in the budget and the forward estimates. So when Bill Shorten says that he is paying for something in this election because he's not proceeding with the tax cuts that are there to grow the economy by supporting small and medium-sized businesses, he's already spent the money. And everything that he is spending in this campaign, every commitment over and above what they're already opposing in the budget and the forward estimates, is spendometer. And that spendometer increases every single day. The second point we take out of the last 24 hours or so is that Labor also can't be trusted on the promises that they've been making. And they've been engaged in a very cynical political exercise over the last couple of years. Extremely cynical. It was only last summer, as we see with the media release that was put out by Jenny Macklin, and she says, the last summer for the school kids bonus. In January of this year, they went out and frightened parents and gave the clear impression that they were going to continue with the school kids bonus in February, when parents were going back to school and kids were going back to school. And in addition to that, they have been very clear in their statements in a release by Bill Shorten as leader of the opposition and Jenny Macklin as the shadow minister responsible. They said in relation to the school kids bonus and the change to the assets test for the pension, drop your unfair cuts or take them to an election. They said in the last two budgets the Liberals have proposed, and they went through a range of issues, including axing the school kids bonus, I quote, and huge pension cuts. And this is what they said in that statement of just March of this year. They said Labor will stand with Australian families against these cuts every day up to the next election. Well, what's clear is it clearly wasn't going to apply after the election if they were elected. It's clear now, with the statements made by Chris Bowen this morning, forced into that position because of the statements we made earlier this week, that Labor are not going to honour that pledge that they made in just March of this year. And so what have we seen? So yesterday, they had a school kids bonus petition on their website. Yesterday. It was all about the school kids bonus that they were going to restore. Today, it's vanished. It's no longer there. The same is true when it comes for what their campaign and deceitful campaign they've been running on the government's changes to the assets test for the pension. That's still there. About 10 minutes ago, as we came into this room, they're still out there pledging that they're going to not go ahead with these changes. Now, people have been giving David Feeney a bit of a rough trot, I think, over the last little while. And it's true, he may have forgotten a house, he may have forgotten his policies, and he may have forgotten his papers last night. That's all true. But the reason he wasn't able to answer that question on his policies yesterday is Labor didn't know what their policies were on this issue. And what we've been able to do over the last 24 hours or so is to flush Labor out on trying to walk both sides of the street, whether it was on the school kids bonus, whether it was on the changes to the assets test on the pension, whether it was indeed over foreign aid. On any of these issues, Labor is being flushed out. Now, I stress, in terms of these changes and the new excuse Labor have come up with as to why they're not going to proceed with this, I mean, the school kids bonus was dealt with in September of 2014. The assets test of the pension was passed in legislation in June of 2015. There has been a MYEFO since that period of time, in December of last year, with no material change to the budget of this year. There was no mention of these things in Bill Shorten's budget in reply, and the PFO confirmed all of those numbers. So to suggest that they now think that they can't continue with these measures simply because of what was in PFO, I think is a pretty lame excuse. What Labor engaged in over a long period of time was a very cynical campaign motivated purely by their political interests, not by their interest in or concern for pensioners, not by their interest or concern for parents of school kids when they go back to school, or those who are passionate about the foreign aid budget, but just a cynical political exercise designed to try and drive up their support, knowing full well that when they are called to account, that they would have to walk away, as they appear to have done. But who knows what they'll do at the end of the day? If they form an alliance with the Greens, who knows what Labor will do? Now, the third thing is, and we get this from the Feeney papers from last night, the Feeney papers show fairly clearly that this is the Labor's position when it comes to costings in this election. It says on page 2, we've made a commitment to fully offset our spending with improvements to the budget bottom line over the medium term in a responsible manner. Now, the medium term is actually 11 years. If you go to the budget papers, that's what the medium term means. And Labor knows that's what it means. The reason they are always talking about 10-year budgets, which Treasury has already confirmed are rubbery when you're talking about 10-year projections. 10 years, they say they can offset these things. Now, I don't think even that's true. But what it is an admission of is they can't make it add up over the next 4 years. That's why you have heard Labor for some time now being very open about the fact that they want to talk about things over 10 years. Well, the Charter of Budget Honesty will require them to do that over 4 years. And it takes me back to where I started, and that is that Labor has a black hole. They are spending more than they are able to save or raise in revenue to pay for the things that they're putting forward in this election and to pay for the things that they're opposing that the government is putting forward. So others will debate how big that is, but one thing is clear: if Labor is elected, the deficit will be higher, the debt will be higher, taxes will be higher, and spending will be higher.
What's your estimate of Labor's black hole now, given that we know there's $18 billion in aid not going ahead, about $3.5 billion in the pensions asset test changes that they won't now change or reverse, $4.5 billion on the school kids bonus, and about $10 billion where you're saying that, for example, they'll bring the super guarantee back into up to 12% by 2020. What's your estimate?
What they're saying changes every day, James. So I still don't know whether they're going ahead with the restoring the $1 billion for ARENA, which Mark Butler promised, or the $1.4 billion that Kim Carr promised for industry support, or at least the $1.6 billion they promised that Catherine King promised on hospitals, or the $315 million that Bill Shorten promised for Indigenous programs, or even the $99 million that Tanya Plibersek promised to restore the Australia network. And then there's the ones that the Shadow Minister for Local Government, Julie Collins, promised for $1.3 billion for local government. So, look, I gave them a few days to sort all this out. They're coming clean on a number of matters yet, but who knows what they'll do in government? Who knows how big the black hole will be actually in government on Labor? Remember, this is a government, when they were in government, the Labor Party, that took a $20 billion surplus and turned it into a $54 billion deficit in just 2 years. And that was when Kevin Rudd was promising to be a fiscal conservative. Now, these guys aren't even promising to be fiscal conservatives. They're actually promising to be fiscal expansionists. So you can imagine the difference of what would be with a Labor-Greens government pursuing these matters. So, look, I'll let you guys do a running tally on this, and I'll let you make your own assessment of the veracity of the commitments they're now making. But based on what they've said before, I can't be sure that they'll stick to a promise from one day to the next.
A couple of days ago, though, you estimated it at $67 billion.
I said it was up to $67 billion based on all the statements. Well, I'm not making an estimate now other than to say it's up to $67 billion. If you believe everything that the Labor Party said prior to Tuesday, that's what it was. Now, how much weight I can put on what they're saying now, it's not 100% clear. I set out very clearly on Tuesday the qualifications around the various buckets, and I set that out from the start, James, as you'll remember, and we put those qualifications on. Our intent was very clear here, and that was to flush out Labor from walking both sides of the street and the cynical exercise they were engaged with important constituencies, be they parents, pensioners or others who they designed to scare, and their scare campaigns have been exposed as just a cynical political trick.
Should the basis of our assessments for both sides of politics really only be, for this campaign, should it be for the next 4 years? And if that's the case, is the point of debate the relative bottom line position of the two sides? And you would still argue that Labor's position is worse than the Coalition's, is that right?
I'll quote your own paper. Your paper's putting the black hole at $22 billion. Well, it says financial review on the top of the masthead, so and that says $22 billion, and that's what they're estimating it at. Others will make their own estimates, but no one, I haven't read anyone saying that there is no black hole for Labor. There is a black hole for Labor, but the point that you raise is the Charter of Budget Honesty sets out the answer to that question, as you know, and that is over 4 years. Now, over in the budget papers, there are medium-term projections, and medium-term is what Labor has referred to in the Feeney papers. And that medium term takes us out over 11 years, and there is a projection of the underlying cash balance over that period of time, which is in our budget, and that incorporates the announcements we've made in that budget. But Treasury were very clear in that estimates hearing to show very clearly about the nature of when you take figures out over a much longer period of time. Now, Labor have chosen to try and make the test to be over this longer period of time. Now, that's not how budgets are done. That's not how the Charter of Budget Honesty requires budgets to be done. And so Labor need to be held to account of whether they can offset the incredible increases in spending they're announcing in this election and have already made going into this election against their savings and tax measures.
So as long as they offset their spending promises, I mean, there's the question of the $18 billion.
Well, all commitments over and above what is in the budget. Now, that includes the $18 billion that they are actually opposing that are in the budget. Now, if they don't want to go ahead with those measures, which they clearly don't, and not one member from the Labor Party has put up a whisper when it comes to the opposition to the measures that were set out in PFO and costed in PFO at $18 billion. Now, they have to pay for that $18 billion. If they're not proceeding with those measures, they need other measures that come up to that figure. And that's why I'm able to say, Laura, that they have said that they are funding things like schools and hospitals and Medicare and things like this from not going ahead with the tax cuts for small and medium-sized business. Now, that is not true because they've already spent every cent. Yeah.
On the dairy package, which is your spending package, what is the budget impact of the dairy package over what sort of time frame, and was it included in PFO, or was this a decision taken post caretaker?
All of the measures that we're announcing in this election will be fully offset, and that will all be made clear before the election.
So PFO in the budget.
I just restate what I just said. All of the measures that we've outlined in this election, and to the extent that measures which are demand-driven and are taken into account when budgets are prepared, they are consistent with what's in the normal budget and forward estimates. So but when there are additional measures that have to be taken into account, then of course the offsets have to be identified for that. Now, I'll give you a good example. This is in an area of support for families, but for example, when we decided to increase the intake for the refugee and humanitarian program out of Syria, now that was a significant cost to the budget, and offsets had to be found, which we found in my EFO, and that was fully offset. So any additional commitments that are made, whether it be the extent of these arrangements, but remember these are concessional loans and they have different accounting treatment to what other matters have in the budget, but the extent to which there are fiscal costs associated with that, then they will be fully offset over the 4 years.
They haven't been yet.
No, that's not what I've said. I'm saying they will be fully offset, and that will be clear in everything we say between now and the election.
Was the decision taken during the caretaker? Your decision on that taken during the caretaker?
I'll refer you to the Agriculture Minister.
No, sorry, I'm not clear though. The question is reasonably simple. Was the dairy decision the costing
These
of it.
decisions are made in response to demands and circumstances that arise, and they are fully offset, and they will be fully offset in the same way that other decisions that are taken in response to demand issues that present, and I've just given you an outline, then they are offset. And that is a matter for the Finance Minister and I to ensure that they are addressed, and they will be.
Respectively.
Yeah.
When was the decision taken? That's all.
Well, he announced it the other day, so that was the decision. I mean, these are issues that had to be dealt with, and he has taken that decision, and I think it's a good decision.
Are you looking forward to the debate tomorrow?
I'm sure it'll stop the nation. I'm sure it'll stop the nation. But what is important about tomorrow's debate is this, and it's what I set out on Tuesday. You can't go round promising to spend money that's not there. The Australian people have seen that from Labor before. They have promised to spend money on health, on education, on the NDIS. They've promised to spend money before when they're in government, and the money wasn't there. Bill Shorten is spending money that he doesn't have. He's spending money he's already spent just on opposing the things that he opposes. And what we have seen over the last 24 hours, again I stress, is there is a black hole for Labor. How big it is? Well, as I said on Tuesday, based on everything they had previously said, as big as $67 billion. They have engaged in a cynical political exercise over the last few years of seeking to play to particular constituencies, tell pensioners that they were going to reverse changes, tell parents that they were going to reverse the school kids bonus, telling people who are passionate about foreign aid that they wouldn't go ahead with the government's foreign aid cuts. Well, we've flushed them out. We've exposed them for exactly what they are, politically cynical and fiscally reckless. And tomorrow, Chris Bowen needs to tell us what it all costs over 4 years if he has any hope of being able to live up to his obligations under the Charter of Budget Honesty. Thanks very much.